A busy city bus stop filled with commuters, each lost in their own world. Among them stands Tasha, a black woman in her early 30s, waiting for the bus after a long workday. Out of nowhere, a racist cop approaches, spewing insults and calling her ugly trash. "I think it's time to put you in your place," he sneers, stepping closer to her. But what the officer doesn't know is that this isn't any ordinary woman. Tasha has a secret, and what happens next will shatter his world. Before we jump into the intense moment, let me know where in the world you're watching from. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to this channel for more shocking stories like this one. Was just another ordinary morning at the bus stop. Tasha, a black woman in her early 30s, stood in line waiting for the bus that would take her to work. The sun was barely up, and the hustle of the city was just beginning. People shuffled around her, their eyes glued to their phones, while others chatted casually. But for Tasha, it was anything but a regular day. Without warning, a police car pulled up near the bus stop, and Officer Rayford stepped out. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man, wearing the typical dark blue uniform, but there was something about him that immediately set Tasha on edge. She had heard rumors about this officer. He had a reputation for being rude, disrespectful, and above all racially biased. Tasha, who had lived her whole life in a world where being black meant having to prove herself again and again, had dealt with disrespectful people before. But this officer's presence felt different. There was a palpable tension in the air as Rayford approached her. "What are you doing here?" Rayford asked, his voice sharp and condescending as he stopped just a few feet away from her. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, and she could feel the judgment pouring from him. Tasha, though used to these kinds of encounters, stood her ground. "I'm just waiting for the bus," she replied coolly, trying to keep her voice steady. Like everyone else, the officer smirked, his eyes narrowing. "Don't lie to me," he said, stepping closer. "This area isn't for people like you. I've seen your kind loiter here before. Don't think I don't know what you're up to." The insult hit Tasha like a slap in the face, but she refused to let him see her react. She had been the target of too many unjust accusations and racial profiling over the years to let this one officer get the best of her. But Rayford wasn't done. He stepped even closer, towering over her now, blocking her from the rest of the crowd. "I don't want to hear your excuses. You people think you can do whatever you want. Well, not on my watch." Tasha's heart raced, but she remained calm. "I haven't done anything wrong," she said firmly. "I'm just trying to get to work." The officer, his anger rising, suddenly grabbed her by the arm. "I don't care. You need to leave now," he growled, his grip tightening on her arm. "This bus stop isn't for people like you. I'm calling backup." Tasha felt a rush of panic, but she knew she couldn't let him intimidate her. She had fought too many battles in her life, and she wasn't about to let a racist cop ruin her day or her life. "Let go of me," she shouted, trying to break free from his grip. That's when the unbelievable happened. Tasha, in an instant, moved with the speed and precision of someone who had faced threats before. She twisted her body, freeing her arm from his grip, and then before Rayford could react, she pushed him back with the full force of her body. He stumbled back, caught off guard by her strength and quick reflexes. The crowd, which had been watching the confrontation silently, now gasped in shock. They had never seen anyone stand up to Officer Rayford in this way. He was known for using his authority to intimidate, and no one had ever dared challenge him before. Rayford, now furious, regained his balance and lunged forward. "You think you can push me around? You think you can get away with that?" He reached for his taser, but Tasha was already one step ahead. She moved quickly, her instincts kicking in. "You don't touch me," Tasha said coldly, her voice shaking with anger, but her body was steady, her eyes locked onto his. Before Rayford could react, a woman in the crowd stepped forward shouting, "Leave her alone. This is police brutality." Tasha could hear the sound of phone cameras clicking as more people began recording the scene. She could feel the tide shifting in her favor. "You're making a mistake," she said to the officer, her voice gaining strength. "This isn't just about me. This is about everyone you've hurt." Rayford hesitated, looking around, realizing that he was no longer the one in control. The crowd wasn't just watching, they were witnesses now, and they were on her side. But that's when things took an even more unexpected turn. The standoff between Tasha and Officer Rayford had shifted in a matter of seconds. The crowd, once passive, was now filled with murmurs of support. People had gathered, some with their phones out, recording the escalating tension. Officer Rayford, visibly frustrated, realized that his usual tactics of intimidation weren't working. He paused, trying to regain his composure, but Tasha, standing firm with her cane still gripped tightly in her hand, wasn't backing down. She could feel the energy in the air shifting. What had started as a confrontation between her and an officer was now something much bigger. Rayford's fingers twitched towards his taser once again, but Tasha kept her eyes locked on his, ready for anything. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice calm but laced with quiet power, "and you're not going to intimidate me." Rayford took a step forward, but before he could say anything else, a loud voice rang out from the back of the crowd. "That's enough." A tall, well-dressed man pushed his way through the crowd, his expression stern. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his gaze locking onto Rayford. The man's presence was commanding, and for a moment, it was as if the world had paused. The crowd fell silent, waiting to see how the officer would react. "This doesn't concern you," Rayford growled, clearly irritated by the man's interruption, but the man didn't back down. "It concerns me when I see a police officer abusing their power. I'm a witness to what's happening here, and I'll be filing a report," the man declared, his voice carrying authority. "You don't get to do this to her." Rayford's face flushed, but he could feel the eyes of the crowd on him. They had all become witnesses, and the momentum was no longer in his favor. Tasha took a deep breath, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. This wasn't just about confronting an officer anymore. It was about standing up to systemic injustice. And now, with the bystanders backing her up, it wasn't just one woman against one officer. It was a movement. The senior officer, the one who had stepped in, moved closer to Rayford, his tone growing more forceful. "Rayford, step aside. I'm going to handle this." His voice was firm, and there was no room for argument. Rayford hesitated for a moment, looking like he was about to protest, but he finally relented, stepping back and muttering under his breath. "You think this is over?" he snarled at Tasha. "You're making a huge mistake." "No," Tasha replied, her voice low and steady, but her words carried the weight of something much greater than just her. "The mistake was yours, and I'm not the one who's going to pay for it." The senior officer turned to Tasha, his demeanor changing as he took in the situation. "Ma'am, I'm deeply sorry for the way you've been treated. I'll make sure this is reported to the proper authorities. This won't be ignored." Tasha nodded, though her mind was racing. "I'll make sure it's not forgotten." She could see the officer's sincerity, but she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. She had just started something much bigger than herself, and now the world would have to reckon with it. The fight wasn't over yet. As the scene at the bus stop began to wind down, a crowd had gathered around, whispering, speculating, and sharing their thoughts. For Tasha, the adrenaline from the confrontation was still surging through her, but she knew she had to keep moving forward. This moment wasn't going to be the only one. She needed to use her voice to make sure it didn't fade into the background like so many other injustices. "You okay?" the man who had stepped in earlier asked, giving her a concerned look. Tasha smiled weakly. "I'm fine, but I won't stop here." She looked toward the officer who had stepped aside. "There's a bigger issue at play here, and it's time we address it." The man nodded. "I think you're right. The world's been quiet for too long. It's time to make some noise." He was right. This wasn't just about one officer at a bus stop. It was about the entire system, about the police brutality that had gone unchecked for so long, about the way black bodies had been dehumanized, mistreated, and often silenced. It was time to speak out, and Tasha was ready to be the voice for those who couldn't. The scene at the bus stop had become the talk of the entire neighborhood. People gathered in small groups, their phones out, recording every detail, sharing their thoughts, and discussing the incident. The words police brutality and racial injustice buzzed through the air like an electric charge. For once, the community was united. It was as if a dam had broken, and now there was no going back. Tasha stood silently as the senior officer spoke to the crowd, trying to smooth over the situation, but his words didn't reach her. She could barely hear him over the pounding of her own heart, the rush of adrenaline still surging through her veins. She had never been one to back down from a fight, but this felt different. The weight of what had just happened, the realization of how far things could go, sat heavily on her shoulders. She had never expected her actions to have such a ripple effect. Officer Rayford wasn't just another bad cop. He was a symbol of everything wrong with a system that allowed men like him to continue their abuse unchecked. And Tasha, standing at the center of it all, had unknowingly become the face of resistance. As the senior officer walked over to her, his expression was a mixture of sympathy and guilt. "Ma'am," he began, his voice more respectful now, "I want to apologize again for what you went through. This incident will not be swept under the rug." Tasha nodded, but there was no satisfaction in his apology. "I've heard apologies before," she said, her voice calm but firm. "They don't mean anything unless there's real action behind them." He paused, nodding in agreement. "We're starting an internal investigation. Rayford will be placed on administrative leave until further notice." Tasha didn't respond immediately. She was trying to absorb the gravity of what had just transpired, But her mind wasn't focused on the apology. It was focused on what came next. "That's a start," she said eventually, her voice unwavering. "But it's not enough. There's a system at work here, and it's broken. Rayford isn't the only one. There are too many like him, too many who get away with this." The officer, now standing with his hands at his sides, nodded again. "I understand, but we need evidence, ma'am. We need something concrete." Tasha turned away from him and looked out across the crowd. People were still murmuring, still trying to process what they had witnessed. "The evidence is right here," she said, her voice louder now. "It's in the way they treat us every day. It's in every 90 incident that gets brushed under the rug. You don't need a video or a piece of paper to see it. The world sees it, and it's time for change." Her words landed with the force of a hammer. The crowd grew quieter, some nodding in agreement. "We can't let this go," Tasha continued. "This is just the beginning." A man in the crowd, an older gentleman who had been watching the whole time, stepped forward. "What are we supposed to do now?" he asked, his voice shaky. "How do we make sure this doesn't happen again?" Tasha met his gaze, her eyes fierce with determination. "We speak out. We organize. We show up. We make sure that what happened to me happens to no one else." The crowd's energy shifted, no longer passive but now engaged, ready to take action. Tasha felt the fire inside her grow stronger. She was no longer just defending herself. She was standing up for everyone who had ever been silenced, who had ever been overlooked or oppressed. Her fight wasn't just her own. It was the fight of every person who had ever been mistreated. The senior officer, watching this transformation unfold, cleared his throat. "We can't fix everything overnight, but we can start with accountability. I'll do my part, but we need your help too. People like Rayford won't change unless we make them." Tasha nodded, her resolve as strong as ever. "You're right, but it starts with us. If we stand together, we can make a difference." As the day wore on, Tasha's words echoed in her mind. She had taken the first step, but the road ahead was long. She had called out the injustice, but now she had to be a part of the solution. This wasn't just about one officer. It was about a system that protected people like Rayford and allowed them to continue their abusive actions without consequence. That night, Tasha couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with thoughts of what had happened and the implications for the future. She knew she had to act fast. The officer's apology, though well-intentioned, wasn't enough. The system needed to be shaken to its core, and she was determined to be part of that change. Her phone buzzed as a text came through. It was from Marcus, the man who had spoken up earlier in the crowd. "We need to get the word out. People are ready to stand with you. Let's organize a protest." Tasha read the message, her finger hovering over the screen. She knew Marcus was right. Now was the time. She couldn't let the momentum slip away. The march, the protest, it was all part of a bigger plan to hold people like Rayford accountable. But as she responded, she realized something even more crucial. This wasn't just about her fight. It was about everyone who had ever been silenced by power, by hatred, by fear. "We're going to change this," Tasha whispered to herself as she typed a response. The days after the confrontation at the bus stop had been a whirlwind for Tasha. The media coverage had exploded. Her encounter with Officer Rayford had been shared across social platforms, and the video capturing the moment she stood her ground had gone viral. People everywhere were rallying around her, expressing their support and admiration for the way she had stood up to the racist officer. But with the spotlight came increased pressure. Tasha had never asked for attention, but now it felt like the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. She had spent countless hours talking to journalists, organizing rallies and meeting with local activists, but despite the overwhelming support, there was still so much work left to do. The authorities, though they had promised to hold Rayford accountable, were still dragging their feet. Tasha knew that the fight was far from over, and the more she pushed, the more she realized that the system she was fighting wasn't just one corrupt cop. It was a system built to protect people like him. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Tasha sat at her kitchen table, her phone in hand. She had received a call from Marcus earlier, and they had discussed the next steps for their campaign, but there was still something gnawing at her. The protest was coming soon, but she didn't want it to just be another march. It had to be a statement, a movement. Her phone buzzed again, and she saw a message from an anonymous number. It was a screenshot of a news article about Officer Rayford, and the headline caught her breath. "Racist cop under investigation for assaulting woman at bus stop, family ties revealed." Tasha's heart skipped. Family ties? She clicked on the article and began reading. The story revealed that Rayford had ties to a powerful family in the city, one that had deep connections to local politicians and the police department. It was a scandal, one that could turn everything on its head, but she wasn't going to let it distract her. Her focus was clear. She would expose the system for what it was, no matter how deeply ingrained it was in the city's foundations. That night, she sent a message to Marcus. We need to dig deeper. It's time to expose the corruption. She felt a surge of determination. Rayford's family wasn't just a distant connection. They were a direct link to the powerful figures who had protected him all along. The following day, Tasha gathered a group of trusted allies. They were meeting at a small local cafe in the heart of the city. It was a safe space, one where they could plan their next steps without the fear of being overheard. Marcus was already waiting when she arrived, sitting at a table in the back, his laptop open in front of him. "I've been doing some digging," Marcus said, tapping a few keys on his laptop. "Rayford's ties go deeper than we thought. His uncle is on the city council, and his father is a well-connected business owner. They're a powerful family, and they've been protecting him for years." Tasha nodded, her brow furrowed. "I knew there had to be more. This isn't just about Rayford. It's about the system that allowed him to get away with this for so long." Marcus clicked a few more times and pulled up a list of names, all of them linked to Rayford's family and business dealings. It was clear that this wasn't just one rogue cop. This was a web of corruption that stretched far beyond what they had initially realized. "This isn't just about justice anymore," Marcus continued, his voice steady. "It's about exposing the entire system. If we bring this to light, it will shake the city to its core." Tasha stared at the screen, feeling a mix of anger and resolve rise in her chest. She had known that the system was broken, but now it was clear that they were up against a monumental force. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to make sure that Rayford's actions didn't go unpunished. She looked up at Marcus. "We have to go public. We have to show the world just how deep this goes." The next week, the protest came to life. It wasn't just a protest against Rayford. It was a stand against the entire corrupt system that allowed his actions to be swept under the rug. Tasha and her team worked tirelessly to organize the event, getting the word out through social media, reaching out to activists and calling on the community to stand in solidarity. On the day of the protest, thousands gathered in the heart of the city. The air was thick with anticipation. People of all backgrounds had come together, united in their demand for change. The streets were filled with signs reading "No justice, no peace," and "End police brutality." But for Tasha, it wasn't just about the crowd. It was about the message they were sending to the powers that be. Tasha stood at the front of the march, her cane in hand, her eyes scanning the crowd. The energy was palpable. There was a collective fury in the air. This wasn't just a protest, it was a movement. As the march made its way toward City Hall, Tasha stepped up to the podium to address the crowd. She could feel the weight of the moment, the eyes of thousands of people upon her. This was it, the moment that would define everything she had worked for. This is not just about one officer. It's about the entire system that protects him and others like him. Tasha's voice rang out, steady and powerful. "We will no longer be silent. We will fight for justice, for every person who has been mistreated, disrespected, and dehumanized. Today is just the beginning." The crowd erupted into cheers, their collective voice a chorus of defiance and hope. Tasha could feel the power of the moment. This was her fight. This was their fight, and they were not going to stop until justice was served. The march to City Hall was not just a protest. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that could change everything. As the crowd swelled, Tasha walked at the front, her heart beating with a mixture of excitement and determination. This wasn't just her fight. It was the fight of every person who had ever been oppressed, silenced, or marginalized. And now she was no longer fighting alone. The chants of the crowd echoed in her mind. No justice, no peace. They weren't just words, they were a declaration. This was about holding a corrupt system accountable, not just for the actions of Officer Rayford, but for the countless others who had gone unpunished. As Tasha reached the podium, the crowd began to quiet down, their eyes fixed on her. She took a deep breath and stepped up, grabbing the microphone. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced. The gravity of the situation wasn't lost on her. This wasn't just another protest. This was a turning point. "This is about more than just one officer," Tasha began, her voice carrying over the crowd. "This is about the system that protects him and allows him to get away with this. We are here today to show them that we won't be silenced any longer. We won't stand by while they continue to oppress us." Her words were met with a roar of approval, and Tasha felt the energy of the crowd surging. They were with her. They were all in this together. She continued, her voice growing stronger with each passing moment. "We've been told for far too long that we don't matter, that our lives, our voices, our rights don't matter. Well, I'm here to tell you that they do. We matter, and we're going to keep fighting until they listen." The crowd erupted once again, the noise deafening as the momentum continued to build, but Tasha knew that this was only the first step. The fight didn't end with a speech, it didn't end with a march. The real battle was just beginning. As Tasha looked out over the sea of faces, she saw the unity in their eyes. This wasn't just a protest, it was a movement that was going to shake the very foundation of the system that had allowed officers like Rayford to abuse their power. The sound of sirens in the distance reminded her that they were being watched, but instead of feeling fear, Tasha felt a sense of empowerment. The police had shown their true colors, but the people had shown theirs as well, and together they were unstoppable. Just then, Tasha's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, one of the leaders of the movement. "We've got news. Internal Affairs has opened a full investigation into Rayford and his ties. It's happening, Tasha. This is real." A wave of relief washed over Tasha, but she quickly refocused. The fight wasn't over. This was just one victory. The real change would come when the system was overhauled, when people like Rayford and his accomplices could no longer hide behind their badges and positions of power. "This is just the beginning," Tasha said into the microphone, her voice carrying the weight of everything she believed in. "We've started a movement, and we won't stop until we get the justice we deserve." As the crowd cheered, Tasha knew that she had started something that couldn't be undone. The fight for justice, for equality, and for the truth was far from over, but Tasha was ready. She was ready to lead this fight, and nothing was going to stop her. As the rally continued, Tasha's mind raced with thoughts of what was next. She had seen the power of the people, and now it was time to put that power to work. The fight wasn't just about one cop. It was about exposing the system, about dismantling the structures that allowed corruption and abuse to thrive. The sound of the crowd chanting justice filled the air. The momentum was building, and Tasha could feel it, the energy surging through her, filling her with hope. "This is how we make change," she whispered to herself. "This is how we win." As the rally wound down, Tasha looked out at the people who had gathered. Some were holding signs, others were simply standing in solidarity, their faces filled with determination. They were all here because they wanted change, because they knew that justice could no longer be delayed. And as the night sky fell, with the glow of the streetlights casting long shadows, Tasha knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. She wasn't fighting just for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been silenced by the system, and this time, the system was going to listen.